Okay, hey, thanks for joining us, Tandem, on Facebook Live, our monthly author interviews. I'm here with Jim Averbeck, author of One Word From Sophia. Actually, he's been writing books for a long time, but One Word From Sophia, Two Problems for Sofia, and Trevor are all newish. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Before we get started, just something fun. Jim, what were you for Halloween yesterday?
For Halloween, I was Frank Furter from the Rocky Horror Show.
Oh.
I went to a live production of Rocky Horror Show by Ray of Light Theater in San Francisco, and it was so much fun. And I actually did a thing on Facebook where I asked people if I should dress as Rocky or as Frankenfurter, and overwhelmingly the response was Frankenfurter, so that's who I dressed as.
Now, which one is the one with the diaper? That's Rocky.
That's Rocky.
Okay.
The gold diaper is Rocky.
You were not the diaper dude.
No, I was not the diaper. I was the curly hair made up in high heels, and man, are my feet killing me today. So
that's very fun.
Yeah, it was fun. We had a good time.
That's very fun. I remember going to the University Theater in Berkeley on University to see Rocky Horror Picture a long time ago. Okay, so back to the interview. Jim, what inspired you to become a writer?
What inspired me to become a writer? So I think that it was a few things. So I think that my brain kind of synthesizes things. I think that's how I do things. And I remember when I was in the Peace Corps. This is probably the moment, right? So I was in the Peace Corps. I worked in Cameroon. And for my third year in the Peace Corps, I worked up in the northern part of the country, and I lived in this little house that was like kind of on the outskirts of this town, and there was a bar nearby, and they would play music. They would play like drums, like not pop music, but like they'd play on drums and these other instruments that were, traditional instruments there. And I was in my house, and they were playing the drums, and I kind of went into a trance state, and I had this vision of a story that was very vivid and very visual, and I thought, kind of when I came out of it, I was like, wow, that would make a great children's picture book. And so I thought about, that was kind of like the moment that I decided I was going to maybe start trying to write picture books for kids. I had no idea what I was doing, but my only training in picture book writing at that point was, do you guys remember that TV show 30-something? There was you probably don't remember it, you're probably way too young. There was a TV show called 30-something, and there was someone on it who was a children's book illustrator.
Oh. And
they had this one episode where they told a story, and it was really long, so I wrote this really long story, and it was completely inappropriate for, it was just too long, too many words, not at all. But eventually I learned. I came back to the States and learned how to actually write that story, and I'm still working on it today.
How cool. What a cool story. Were you in Cameroon for a long time?
Yeah, I was there for 3 years. I did water projects, and because I have a degree in engineering, so that's what I did when I was there. Yeah, brought clean water to the villages.
Very interesting. Very interesting. When did you start writing? Oh, that was in Cameroon.
That was kind of when I started. I mean, obviously when I was a kid, I probably wrote a couple stories when I was a kid. I think I wrote one called The War in the Garden or something, The Garden War, something like that. It was like all the good things in the garden, like the bunnies and the birds and all the things that are sweet. They had a war with like the snakes and the scorpions and the spiders, and that's all I remember of it.
Cool.
I'm sure I thought it was brilliant when I was
creative.
a kid.
You probably was. What kind of kid just comes up with an original story like that? You must be a creative person. Okay, so your Sofia books feature a girl who wants a pet giraffe. Did you ever want an unconventional pet as a child? And if so, what was it?
Yes, I did. And there was this old movie called Mighty Joe Young, which I think they remade a few years ago. But there was an old one from like the 30s, and they used to show it like every other weekend on our local TV station. And it's about this young girl in Africa who gets this gorilla. And it's kind of like King Kong, except he's nice King Kong. not destructive King Kong, and so I wanted a pet gorilla. I really wanted a pet gorilla, and I would go to the mall with my mom, and there was this wishing fountain in the middle, and I'd throw a coin in and I'd say, please, please, let me get a pet gorilla. And would you believe it that my mother never got me one?
Yeah,
it's a great tragedy. She always had a reason why we couldn't have a pet gorilla.
Aww. Okay, so is that where you got the inspiration for One Word from Sophia?
It is part of it, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, part of it was definitely about thinking about my past and the things I wanted as a kid, right? Because I think that that's a really great way to write a book, is to remember your own childhood and what you were passionate about, because that's a great way to connect to sort of the child's emotional world. And so I had a memory of wanting this pet gorilla, and so that was part of the One Word process. It was also a part of, so I have this critique group, this very great critique group called the Revisionaries, and we have this little thing we do at Christmas time where we write a story in 2 weeks, and we write it to a theme, or like a little phrase that we give, and one year the phrase was one word. So that was another part. So
like
everybody had to write a book in 2 weeks that met the theme one word. And so so that was kind of another part of the inspiration for One Word from Sophia. And also there was a little when I was thinking about how I would write a one-word book, or a book about one word, I thought about it being a really important word. And I remembered that my mom used to talk about the magic word, please. So that became kind of the climax of the story, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
So that's where that all came from.
That's very cool. Oh, I had a follow-up question, actually.
Okay.
So my question was, if you wrote One Word from Sophia, and then you were working on this one, how in the world did you switch gears to Trevor? Like, how were they happening simultaneously, or in your mind were they simultaneous, or how does that work? Because weren't you like so focused on Sophia? Like, how did you even?
Yeah. So I wrote One Word from Sophia, and then it took me a while to convince the publishing company to do sequels to. So there's actually 2 problems for Sophia. There's a 3rd one that's going to come out next year. And I don't know the title yet because it's, I don't know, it's kind of up in the air. I have some ideas, but we haven't really settled on it yet. So I guess, let's see, how did it work? So I guess I was working on this, on the second 2 when Trevor came up. But remember I said that we do that thing around Christmas time where we have a theme, right? So one of the reasons we do that is because at the Christmas party that we have for this critique group, I know that we're going to be like eating and drinking, and so we always we don't want to work on the stuff we've been working on for a long time, because we think it's going to be a party that's more of a party than a work session.
Yeah.
So one year, I guess one year the theme was sour fruit, and that's what started me on Trevor. So I had to write it for this this assignment that we do in this group. I had 2 weeks to write it, so I just put everything aside and wrote it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you definitely are a creative person, because if someone were to tell me, "Oh, think about sour fruit," I don't know how I would come up with that. That's pretty cool. That is very cool. Okay, so what's your favorite part of creating children's books?
My favorite part of creating children's books is probably the epiphanies, the aha moments. I think that when I'm struggling with a story and I'm not sure like how it's going to end, or how it's going to make the connection to kids, or how I can make it sort of stand out or make it special, that's when I'm sweating, that's when I'm struggling a lot. And then what happens is something clicks, like there's, like I said, I think my brain synthesizes things. So there's a lot of junk going around in my brains, and then something clicks, and I have that epiphany, And when I have that moment, you know, it's like you get goosebumps and you're like, that's it. That's going to work. And that is the best feeling. It just feels really good. When you know, like, you worked really hard, then you have this epiphany. It's a really great feeling as a writer. At least it is for me.
I imagine it must be, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what is your favorite part of creating children's books?
Yes, it was.
What's the hardest part?
The hardest part. Okay, so the hardest part of creating a children's book, I think, is that there's a lot of gatekeepers between your pen and the bookstore shelf, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, you write this thing and you think it's really good, and then you have to show it to, you know, maybe you've got a critique group and maybe their reaction isn't as strong, or, you know, but that's kind of their job, right? And then you get it really, where you think, oh, it's really going to be good, and then you send it out to editors. Your agent gets it, and the agent may have something to say too, and then it goes to the editors, and the editors may or may not like it, and, you know, and that can be really, that's the hardest part. It's not exactly that it's the rejection, because rejection is actually pretty, you get used to it, you know, but it's just that you have this thing that you think is really working, and you think it's really beautiful, and then it's just, sometimes it is, and it's just not a particular editor's cup of tea, and so then you're kind of at a loss after a while. So I guess that's the hardest part, is like all the people that have to kind of like it, and that you have to make sure that they understand what it is you're trying to say in your book. Mm-hmm. So that's the hardest part.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like the growth mindset that we always promote in children, that keep trying,
exactly.
Keep at it, you can get better, you can improve, make improvements. Excuse me.
Definitely have to have the growth mindset as a writer.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How many books have you published?
I think I'm getting close to, I think I'm around 10. 10, yeah. 10
and
books,
how
10
many
to 12.
How many books have you written that you thought were really good and that did not get published? A lot or no?
Let me think. There's a lot that kind of start and then they got kind of set aside. Like every once in a while I'll go back and look through my files and I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty good story. I should go back to that one. But, you know, I get distracted or something else seems more interesting to me, so I go off and do that. So I don't know how many of those there are. A lot. There's a lot of those kind of false starts, or at least stuff that just isn't been completed. But things that have actually sent out that have then been like rejected, oh, there's been at least a half a dozen, maybe more. You know, I don't usually send them out until I feel pretty strongly that they have a chance. Mm-hmm. But I would say at least a half a dozen. There's the one that I told you about that I came up with in Cameroon, the first thing I wrote. I've been working on the thing for 20 years, and it gets a lot of attention. But I've never been able to seal the deal, you know. And finally, I have figured it out. I figured out how to make it work. I did. I had an epiphany.
Cool.
I figured out how to make it work after 20 years of working on it off and on. So I feel really good about it again. But then there are some that I can think of four books recently, like 4 books in the last maybe 2 or 3 years that I sent out that got, you know, let's just say they haven't found their home yet. You know.
Wow, that's pretty impressive though, that if you've sent out 4 books and actually published 3 books in 2 years, so you're writing like 6 books a year? No. I probably write about maybe like complete 2 books or 3 books a year. That's a lot.
Well, they're picture books, so they're not that they're easier to write, but they take less time.
Yeah.
You know, they're actually kind of in some ways harder to write. I know a lot of novelists who can't do it because you have to do everything that a novelist does in 100,000 words. You have to be able to do in 500 words, right? You have to have a story arc. You have to have a character. You have to have a great, you know, finish, a great ending, and an emotional hook, and you know all these things that you can develop much more slowly in a novel. It all has to happen really quickly in a picture book, and that's kind of hard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a specialized kind of writing. Let's just say that, you know, like poetry or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that you've been an illustrator, that you illustrated a book for Linda Sue Park, but have you ever thought about illustrating your own books?
I have illustrated some of my own books. I illustrated a book called Except If, and a book called Oh No Little Dragon, and a book called Market Bowl, and then the Linda Sue Park one that you talked about. So I've done both. I've illustrated for other people. I've had my books illustrated by other people, and sometimes I do both. Sometimes the story, though, sometimes my story, so I have a style, like kind of an art style, and sometimes that style of art is not right for the story that I've written. The style of the story and the art don't match. And so an editor will get that story, and sometimes I even turn in the artwork for it, and they'll be like, well, we really like this story, but we have another idea for who the illustrator could be. And I'm like, okay, who? And then they tell me these great people like Yasmin Ismail or Amy Hevron, both of whose work I love, and I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So yeah, so it works out pretty well. And it's kind of nice then, in a way it's nice, because then when they buy it, like, I'm done practically, right? I mean, I have to go through a little bit of editorial stuff, but the rest of the work then from that point on is with the illustrator. Whereas if they bought it and wanted me to illustrate it, then I'd have to do all that work. So yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so now switching gears a little bit, we're going to move on to our work at Tandem. And Jim, you've attended both of our galas and sat with our attendees. If you were going to write a children's book about the Tandem Gala, what characters did you feature?
Okay, so I would probably, I believe that children's books should feature child protagonists, and should be about the child's world. But I would definitely, I can definitely see from the Tandem Galas, I can definitely see the auctioneer. Like, I would love to write, now that I'm thinking about it, would be really fun to write like a child auctioneer, Going once, going on. Yeah, that could be really fun. And an auction has its own, it's got its own kind of story arc, right? Because like there's this initial bidding and it's kind of like, okay, and then like it narrows down to a couple people and there's this conflict between them because they each want whatever they're bidding on, and then it starts to kind of die down, and then the auctioneer kind of steps in and kind of, I don't know, like turns up the heat a little bit or something, and then the bidding starts again, and everybody is watching and getting all invested in it, and then it's the going once, going twice, sold. I mean, it's a kind of an exciting thing.
Is very dramatic.
So I think that would be a really fun story to do, and I just might do it. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, so the auctioneer would definitely be. I should talk to your auctioneer person, because she's really, really funny and interesting. I've gotten to talk to her a little bit at the gala, but I should interview her for the book.
Yeah, that would be a really good idea, and it would introduce children to a world that they may not be familiar with.
Yeah.
It would, expand their worldview. That'd be really cool. Okay, so what do you think is the value of storytelling with young children?
There is a lot of value to storytelling, and I'm going to give you this slice of it. I think that I have this theory that kids are geniuses, okay? There are people who think that kids' brains are like blank slates and they just have to be filled up with information, and that is what, that'll make them smart. But I actually think that kids just need experience. I think that their brains, if you look at kind of some of the neuroscience, and I'm not, this is my disclaimer, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I did do a little research for a talk I did once about the genius of children. They have like a lot of neurons in their brains. Like they have way more than in some ways than we have as adults, because their brains are really plastic and are kind of learning what they need to do to survive. And later on they go through a period called pruning, where they lose some of their neural capacity. And when they're younger, they have like, not just like, if you can imagine like, I don't know, like sort of neurons going this way in different silos, they have a lot of like lateral connections between the different parts of their brain, so they're pulling information from everything and processing it, to learn how they're going to live in the world that they are in. So what happens in pruning is that they lose them because they don't use them. So I think the biggest value is that we give, through stories, you can use more of your brain. You use all kinds of, you use vocabulary, you use like a certain amount of like social and emotional kind of information.
For sure.
And as you, when you're a young child, because your brain has all these neurons and you're using them, that means you're strengthening them, you're not going to lose them. So you'll be smarter when you get older.
Very good answer.
So
That's a perfect answer. We agree with a lot of that. Most
Good.
of it. We agree with most
That's
of it.
right. You guys are all about literacy, right?
Yeah,
so
literacy
there you
and
go.
Experience and the repetition that is involved when when a child's brain is developing and repeating books and repeating the love of books, all of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, what do you think makes a story engaging and powerful? And you might have already talked about that when you were talking about like the social emotional connection.
Yeah,
and all that.
for me, different stories have different things that make them powerful and good. But I think that the things that I always respond to, so I do a lot of like mentoring of other writers and teaching and stuff, and I really put a big emphasis on making an emotional connection, both with the reader and with the characters, between the characters and with the characters' world. Like you want your reader to really connect emotionally with the character that they're reading about. And there's different ways to do that. But I believe that that's the most powerful, those are the most powerful stories. And I should say that I also think that the most powerful stories aren't always, there's a misconception that children's books, picture books, should all be light and happiness and kind of like, childhood is all innocence and nothing ever goes wrong. But kids know better. Kids know that the world can be really scary sometimes, and they're small and they don't have a lot of power, right? And so I feel like the best books help children see that they do have some power, that they do have some ability to become a part of the world and to learn and grow in that world. So that's what I think is really powerful, and you have to make that connection with a kid. So, yeah.
And it's true when you read the storybooks that I like, there is an emotional connection with me and my child, or me and the character, or exactly what you described. That's very true. Okay, so what advice would you give to children who want to grow up to be authors, or what advice were you given that you found particularly helpful?
If you're a child and you want to grow up and be an author, I would say read a lot, write a lot, and save everything you do, right? Because when you grow up, some of those things that you have, keep a diary too. Because all of that information that you have as a child, if you want to grow up and be a writer for children, that's like, it's like gold, right? It's what is it? Grist for the mill. It's like, it's information that you can use, in your own stories when you grow up. And the stories that you've written as a child, like those can become books when you get old enough. Not many publishers will publish them, with child authors. Some, I think, maybe will, and there's places where you can get them published. But, I'm thinking about like No David, by David Shannon. Did you ever read that? Like that was supposedly a book that his mom, he made when he was a kid, and his mom found it in a box somewhere or something and sent it to him, and he's like, this would make a great kids book, and it really is. It's fun. It's a fun kids book. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I might be wrong about that, but that's what I heard. So if David Shannon wants to tell us we're wrong about that, he can let us know. He can put it in the comments.
And then not that long ago, there was a young lady that wrote a novel. Like she was 13 at the time. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it's gonna evade me. So let's just move on.
Chris Bellini wrote those, the dragon ones.
Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I'm
he was like 15, and then Essie Hinton wrote The Outsiders when she was 17, I think. So
very inspiring.
Yeah. So it's I didn't mean to try and sound discouraging to say
no.
that you it probably it's just that a lot of legally a lot of companies there's legal issues with I think maybe publishing something from a minor and it gets kind of sticky for them. So I don't know. I'm speaking out. I don't really know that for sure. So send it in anyway.
Yeah, no.
Tell them you're 21.
Very cool. Okay. So at Tandem, we're all big fans of children's books. So of course, we like to end our interviews with one of our favorite questions. What's your favorite children's book?
Oh, there are so many, which I'm sure everyone tells you. But I think, my favorite picture book is probably it's probably Where the Wild Things Are. Or maybe Outside Over There. I'm thinking, I really am a big Sendak fan. I love the lyricism of his language, and I love the way he's not afraid to go to some dark places, and yet he makes those dark places kind of fun in a way. I mean, Where the Wild Things Are is, all these giant monsters, but, Max learns to tame them, and so I would say those are two books from the past that I really like. From today, let's see, what are some of the books I've liked a lot? Well, this past cycle, this past 6 months or something, where new books have come out, I liked Dreamers. I really liked Dreamers by Gigi Morales. I liked Mixed by Aaron Chung, and both of these people are in my critique group. That's a disclaimer. I've seen their books, forming behind the scenes, so that's cool. I liked, and also along the more contemporary things, I really like John Clausen's work. I like the Hat books. Same thing. They're a little bit scary, but they're fun at the same time. I don't know how. I wish I want to do stuff that's a little darker, but I haven't been able to find anybody will let me do it yet. So we'll see. I've turned them in, but remember those books that I told you got sent back? Some of them were a little dark, so I guess I have to figure out what the right formula is for that.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, we like Mixed. I love you, Gigi. All of her work, and the Hat books. We talked about that. Really good choices.
Yeah, there are so many good ones.
And of course, Maurice Sendak. Very good choice.
Yeah. I mean, really, everyone
it's hard to choose.
We wish we could be Maurice Sendak, right? Because Where the Wild Things Are, it's perfect. It's just perfect. That last line, and it was still hot, when he comes back and he finds his dinner waiting for him, and it was still hot. Oh,
I really like the Spanish translation because the monstruos tienen garras terribles y sus ojos terribles. It's a nice translation. But anyway, okay, so as we close out our interview, I want to know, is there anything people should look out for from you? Anything on the horizon?
Yeah, on the horizon is the third Sofia book.
Oh,
I'll tell you, cool. I'll give you the setup for it. So, One Word From Sophia, I wrote it, I told you about why I wrote it, but it turns out that teachers find it to be this really great book to teach a thing called persuasive writing, or opinion writing. I had no idea that I didn't write it for that. But it got very popular with teachers for that reason. And so I decided I would make all the Sofia books kind of more tied to, if I could, make them something that was more classroom friendly. So the second Sofia book, Two Problems for Sofia, is about, so she's got the giraffe now, and it snores, and so she has to figure out what to do about that. And she creates this thing, so it's kind of like a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math book. And she has to create this invention to deal with that. So I actually call it Sofia Creates a CPAP Machine, if you know what a CPAP machine. And then the third one, there's another kind of idea in education called STEAM, where you add arts to the science, technology, engineering, and math. And so the third one is about Sofia the artist, and she creates a piece of art, and she thinks it's quite beautiful, and she wants to hang it up on the refrigerator. But the refrigerator is a brand new stainless steel, most expensive refrigerator in their newly renovated kitchen. And the adults in her life are like the acquisitions committee. So the refrigerator is set up like it's the museum, and the Louvre, it's the Louvre, and she wants her piece of art in the Louvre, and her family are the acquisitions committee, and she has to get past them. She has to figure out how to get them to understand, as many artists do, who are on the cutting edge, that her art is worthy of inclusion in this museum.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so we'll look for Sofia coming out.
Sophia 3. Right now, I think it's
Sophia
going to be
3.
called. I think it's going to be called Love Sophia, where the E in love is going to be like a 3. But I don't know for sure. I don't know if they'll go for that because it's a little bizarre. You don't look convinced either.
Well, I guess I would have to see it, like on the
Yeah.
Love Sophia. But I don't know. You're right. To be honest, what you were describing doesn't really, to me, it doesn't call that to mind.
The name of the piece of art that she creates is called Love.
Oh,
So that's,
okay. That makes sense. Okay. And then last but not least, where can people find you online?
They can find me at my website, jimaverbeck.com, jimaverbeck.com, or jimaverbeckbooks.com. Either one. I kind of own both domains, and they point you both to the same place. So I'm there, and I tweet.
You tweet.
And sometimes, sporadically, I'm on Facebook sporadically. So if they just put my name in, they can find me there. Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
I have an Instagram account
Oh,
too.
Instagram. Look for him on Instagram. Look for him on Facebook, Twitter, and online too. Yeah. Very cool. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us. And we'll have another author interview next month, so stay tuned. Thank you.